Where was the Arbiter during the fall of Reach, or even during Halo 1 and up to Halo 2? Well, he was busy doing some really cool stuff. He was right behind the scenes. This is really interesting lore if you don't already know where and what the Arbiter was doing during these games. Guys, let's jump into it, but first, drop this video a like if you want to help support the channel and want to see more videos like this. This video is supported by Audible. Snag yourself a free Halo audiobook right down in the description below. The Arbiter is super loved by Halo fans because he has a full redemption arc going from Supreme Commander in the Covenant to Shamed Arbiter to Traitorous Heretic. But not many people know about his early life in the Covenant and his presence before that redemption took place in Halo 2, and what exactly he was doing in Halo Reach and Halo 1, because he actually had a huge influence in those games. Even though he didn't directly appear, he was actually there the whole time. And there's actually even a whole month of timeline between Halo 1 and Halo 2. Where was he then? Well, we're going to be talking about that as well. Well, Thel was actually born in 2485, making him like 70 years old by Halo Reach's timeline. But it was only his career through 2535, after that, about 50 years old, that he would receive a leadership role. However, it was the Battle of Metacity that Thel would gain the Supreme Commander position. And after that, Thel would be responsible for killing over 1 billion lives, his fleet in particular. And so, yeah, he did quite a dent on the UNSC, and of course, he would partly lead the invasion on Reach. Now, this Supreme Commander position is one of the most highest attainable in the Covenant Navy, and it's only given to elites, so this is quite the honor, and it was quite the responsibility as well. Supreme Commanders like Thel here would command large fleets and armadas. We're talking about hundreds of ships. In regards to the Arbiter's or Thel's exact location and whereabouts on Reach or in orbit of Reach isn't actually known, but we do actually know a fair number of things that he did indirectly, like sending soldiers or sending Covenant ships to do this or that, was in fact, because he was in charge of some of the Navy and ships during Reach, at least on the last few days. So it's possible that we saw at least a couple, if not a whole lot, of RB ships in Reach. Thel most certainly did make the strategic moves to invade in orbit as they did and have this massive space battle and attack the orbital gun generators on ground. Oni determined Thel as one of the most dangerous Covenant assets, perhaps the most dangerous one, and even though it seemed that UNSC would win, they would lose, since Thel played such an unpredictable game when encountering the UNSC. It was August 12th when the Long Night of Solace would be infiltrated by Noble Team and destroyed, but at the cost of George's life. It was right after this that the fleet of Righteous, or potentially the fleet of Holy Respite, arrived and cut away at UNSC's defenses. It was actually August 30th, about 2 weeks later, the last day of Reach you could say, was when the Arbiter's fleet of Particular Justice arrived. So the Arbiter arrived pretty late in the invasion, but the 315 ship armada, including the fleet of Particular Justice, it wasn't all his fleet, but a big part of it would actually begin to engage in this massive epic space battle with UNSC forces, including the Pillar of Vadam, and would fight off several MAC cannons as well, backing the UNSC up. The UNSC put up one hell of a fight here, quickly destroying tons of Covey ships. Even in the Arbiter's case, he sustained massive losses immediately because of the terrifying might of the MAC cannons that were in orbit of Reach. In those first moments of battle, as the Covenant raged forward on Reach's front door, 30% of this army would immediately perish, and statistically, I would say, same thing with Arbiter, about 30% of his forces were wiped clean immediately, thanks to the, quote, big sticks. In retaliation, one of the flagships and the forces released an ion plasma cannon of sorts, a new experimental sniper, if you will, that could shoot ships way far out of the orbital gun generator firing range, instantly tore 50 UNSC ships up like paper, although the Pillar of Autumn would soon go after it and destroy it successfully. During this epic fight, the Arbiter would send down a flurry of ships down to the surface to destroy the MAC generators where about 70 Spartans were stationed at, fighting off eventually thousands of Coveys, and were eventually run over and the generators would be destroyed. And many of these Spartans would end up dying. And many of these ships that had slipped by MAC cannons had actually gone into the atmosphere atmosphere down to land and start invading and causing disruption and attacking stuff. It was also during this time that the Covenant had sought out to acquire a human nav database, a crystal that, if found, would reveal all human worlds, including Earth. Master Chief, Blue Team's Kelly, and Sergeant Johnson would go defend the crystal from Thel's forces, and the crystal would eventually be destroyed, and Chief would return to the Pillar of Vadam with Linda. However, she would be gravely injured, technically dead, and threw her in cryo, and the ship would return down to Reach's surface, pick up Cortana's other fragment that Halsey had given Noble 6, and the ship would get the hell out of Dodge. It was at this time, or around this time, the Arbiter's forces would have pretty much taken over the whole glassing procedure of Reach and destroying whatever was left, as long as it wasn't like destroying foreigner stuff or titanium deposits, as well as with the Holy Respite that would actually be backing up the Arbiter, and they basically created a system perimeter to effectively stop human vessels from escaping, which is probably exactly how they saw the Pillar of Autumn escaping, and that's when Thel, or the Arbiter, would decide to pursue after the Autumn, knowing that it had some importance. And some people do have the theory that he was responsible for killing Noble 6, but I mean, there's like a dozen reasons why that can't be the case, including he was busy chasing the Autumn at this time. So now we're getting caught up with Halo 1 just about. It's around September 19th, 3 weeks after Reach was totally destroyed, and the Arbiter basically had tracked the Pillar of Autumn via light speed, and the Autumn's very obvious slip space tear gave the location of where they were. It was before this Halo 1 opening attack that the Covenant had already bared witness to this construct, the Halo Array, and determined that it was in fact a creation by the Covenant's gods, the Foreigners, and the Prophet Stewardship, the highest ranking political figure present in Thel's small little, fleet. Now consider this conflict as a religious matter. However, Thel refused to give up command, and since this fleet was out in the middle of nowhere, High Charity wasn't really able to be reached to determine if Thel or the Prophet was in total command. Oh, also fun fact, Thel knows very well of the demon at this point, referring to him as, well, the demon. So you guys know what happens. The Pillar of Autumn is boarded and eventually destroyed. But it was during this attack that an elite named Zulka Zamami was a Prophet-blessed Spec Ops elite that was on board with the fleet of Particular Justice, and he would specifically hunt down Master Chief, and he actually boarded the UNSC Pillar of Autumn and faced him. He was shot, however, he did not die. Zulka would actually begin to lay out traps and strategically set up events to, kill Master Chief, although he would fail. But honestly, that story deserves its own video, but it's very interesting. Things with Thel and the Covenant forces, though, would get much more complicated here. The Prophet began undermining Thel's command and misappropriating Covenant forces to secure certain parts of the Halo installation. Now, Thel learned of this and would send a squad to relieve the Prophet of being able to command, maybe arrest him, but that squad would be destroyed or killed. It's not quite clear what happens, but the Prophet threatened Thel with punishment for any disruption of his leadership in the Installation 04 operation, and that kind of pissed off Thel, so he actually sent a strike force to physically relieve the Prophet. And it was at this time that the Infinite Succor, which was basically a supply and reinforcement ship, had sent out an emergency beacon. And now boarding the ship, the Covenant forces would for the first time encounter the parasite, the Flood. So as Thel was on the Particular Justice, he would about to leave on a strike force to subdue the Ascendant Justice, and Thel Vadamee would report back to the Particular Justice and say that the Flood has been unleashed on Halo. The Flood we see in the comics is actually very different, with a lot more flood, more gore, more hair, as you guys have probably noticed. Maybe a bit more disturbing, but let me know your thoughts on this take of the Flood. It's certainly very interesting. The timeline is a little bit unknown here because there's not really timestamps or anything that I could see that specify the exact hour or day, but considering the comic opens up with Chief in a swamp, probably around the same time Chief discovered the Flood, via Jenkins' helmet, which would be fitting because that's right around when the Covenant would discover the flood as well. So on September 20th, that's only one day after Halo 1 starts, with the UNSC on the ring, the flood outbreak, the power struggle, things are getting very confusing and very complicated with Thel. So really the organization and confusion and panic is setting, which is probably giving Chief time to do his thing in Halo 1. Thel actually ordered an evacuation of all Covenant ships off the ring around this time, probably shortly after the flood was encountered by Chief, and shooting down any friendly vehicles in the Covenant that failed to return clean bioscans, worried that the flood would further spread. Now, when Thel's forces arrived on the Ascendiant Justice to deal with the Prophet of Stewardship, he realized that the steward was not there. He was actually, in fact, on the Truth and Reconciliation, and we all know what happened there, right? The crew of the Ascendiant Justice recognized immediately Thel as the leader in the Installation 04 situation. Just a fun fact there. But later, once the Truth and Reconciliation was captured by the UNSC, as we saw in Halo 1, Thel did not offer to help. Probably not only to save his remaining fleet from falling more to the flood, but was also probably an ego thing that was like, well, you tried to overthrow me, you tried to get in my way, I'm not going to come help you. But this would be a terrible, grave mistake and would lead to Thel's becoming the Arbiter. Great shame here. In fact, it might be the reason why the ring was destroyed, because declining to help the Truth and Reconciliation when it needed its help would ultimately give Chief and Cortana more of a chance, more time to eventually destroy the Pillar of Vadam's core at the end of Halo 1, thus destroying the whole damn installation. All due probably to Thel's ego. So now we are at the point of Halo 1's ending and entering into this open space a month timeline taking place between Halo 1 leading up to Halo 2. A lot actually happens in that time. You can learn more about it on Audible with Halo First Strike, but it leads up to October 20th. That's the first day of Halo 2. But what happens during this time, right after the destruction of Installation 04, there wasn't much more the Arbiter could do, so he ordered his ships to fall back a little bit. Of course, this would lead into a much more grave mistake if Thel didn't miss up already. Master Chief, still alive, aboard a longsword, would find Sergeant Johnson and others and board the Ascendiant Justice. And in confusion with other Covenant vessels, the Justice would enter slipspace, go back to Reach to rescue Blue Team and Dr. Halsey. And later, aboard the Justice, Dr. Halsey had brought a foreigner crystal on board to trick and deter the Covenant from destroying the vessel, and Thel was desperately searching down this vessel. So to make a long story short, what happens next is that Master Chief and the others would complete Operation First Strike and destroy the unyielding Hierophant, killing millions of Covies and a fleet of hundreds of Covenant ships that were supposed to attack Earth, but delayed the invasion by a whole month. So if you didn't understand why Thel became the Arbiter before, hopefully, now you do. If you want to get more into Halo lore and learn about what happened with the Fall of Reach, then I certainly recommend getting Audible's 30-day free trial, picking up Fall of Reach. Or if you want to learn about what happened between Halo 1 and Halo 2, I would pick up Halo the Flood or Halo First Strike, because they're awesome books. Also, check out my other video, Where Was the Arbiter During Halo 3, Halo 4, and Halo 5. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Like this video up if you did enjoy, and I'll catch you in the next one soon. Alright, peace guys.